Quran talks about people who live a life narrowed down. They live a life narrowed down. What causes their life to be narrowed down? In this connection, it means that no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. You know, so they build these fences around what they can and cannot do. But oftentimes, as the picture of the Jews those who call themselves Jews and are called Jews in the Quran, Bani Israel, God said, I didn't prescribe these laws for them. They prescribed the laws for themselves. And that happened with the monastics, the ascetics, and God said, I didn't prescribe that for they prescribed it for them. They made it law on themselves. They made it religion on themselves. I had a broader field of freedom, but they started setting up restrictions for themselves. That was one of the things that Jesus Christ, alayhi salatu wasalam, pushed back against the scribes and the Pharisees and the people of his time. Did God tell you to do that, or are you doing that on your own? Right? And so that continues, right? And so a person can live a life narrowed down because they've set up boundaries, that these quote unquote moral fences, you can't cross over that, no, and so that's a big part. I hope you're putting together for your own self the idea. Yeah, I know somebody like that, and I know some people like that. I know that. So just as long as you can see a model example of what I'm talking about, in that that's useful. So I'm saying that put the morals aside. Now, when I say put the language morality aside and switch it out for tahara, switch it out for growth and purification, right? Here's one of the ways that I work with what needs to be done there. We're not trying to be sinless. This is sinless. Putting these two things together, right? Sinless. Our goal is not to be sinless. That's impossible. It is impossible to be sinless. I repeat, it is impossible to be sinless. All right? There's a lot to it, but the point is, it's just not possible. Right? The Imam said, if there was no sin, there would be no choice. There would be no choice. So it's just imagine there was no sin. You can imagine it. Okay. Where's free will? Where is it? But let's keep moving. It's not possible to be sinless. The goal is to sin less, not to be sinless, but to sin less. When you sin less, now that's purification, purification, purification. All right. So in Islam, tahara, those who purify themselves, right? That's what we're always trying to do, right? Salat, zakat, fasting, hajj, etc. That's that. Okay, now here come back to the other word. Fastabiqul khairat. Fastabiqul khairat. Fastabiqul khairat is in this connection. It's one is to understand it less in so-called moral terms and less even in terms of purification, but more in terms of practicality and problem solving. Practicality and problem solving. I hope just in these few minutes that you get reminded, and I'll try to do so consciously right now, is that what you're hearing from me, it's no boast, it's an explanation. What you're hearing from me is parsing out, decomposing, deconstructing, what thinking is. And when we talk about philosophy, we talk about ethics, then these are the things, and these are the separations, and these are the distinctions. The distinction between morality and purification as terms in al-Islam, tahara particularly. And then now taking that which has more bearing on first level, has more bearing on, you know, the right and wrong, the good and the bad, the sin and not sin. Okay, those go over there. Okay, now over here on the other side, fastabiqul khairat, God tells you what to do, right? The thing that you're supposed to do is strive after what is best under the circumstances. So that's a value system. That's a value system for us in al-Islam, which calls for a certain way of thinking. When God tells you fastabiqul khairat, it calls for a certain way of thinking. Back to chess, right? You have chess, you have whatever, the opponents, each of the opponents, everybody's focused on the board, and everybody's focused on the position of the pieces on the board, right? You have to think. You have to think of the possibilities, the potential in each one of the pieces, the position of the pieces, and so many other things around what makes the game what it is. Right? No details. Just knowing that. But if it's your move, then you have to do all this calculation, you have to do all this assessment, and then you have to make a decision to move or change the position of those pieces, which will change the position of the whole board. Indeed, actually, after every move, it's a new game. After every move, it's a new game. And the possibility, that being said, and the possibility that you're playing a game that has never been played before. Put that in the margin. The idea is fastabiqul khairat. You have to make a move. For every move, there's an advantage and a disadvantage. You make the move here, okay, well, it's an advantage in one respect, but in other respects, there's a disadvantage. That is known, but you have to make a choice. Okay, fastabiqul khairat. That's what chess is actually telling you with every move. Fastabiqul khairat. Strive for what is best under the circumstances. All right. So it's not an issue of morality or purity when you're talking about practicality and problem solving. It's particularly it's just what is the best thing to do under the circumstances. That's what God has ordered. God hasn't ordered you be pure, be sinless, all right? Or even, quote unquote, be moral, taking into consideration everything I said about the word itself and its origins, moral. God saying, do what's best. Do what's best. Now, people of quote unquote of simple right and wrong morality, they'll look at a thing which is indeed the best move from one who knows, and they say, no, that's wrong. That ain't right. Well, that now you can kind of get a picture of the angels in that picture of the Quran. That's not right, right? Why? Because you have this innocence, you have this purity, you have this idea of what the boundaries of, you know, what's right and what's wrong. But then God tells the angels, nevertheless, I know what you don't know, right? And that's also a part of the problem with those who try to and inappropriately label and assess what has happened in the work of the quote nation of Islam of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Farad Muhammad. And they say, nah, that ain't right. Subhanallah, astaghfirullah. That's because you're an angel, potentially. You're an angel, you're good, you want to obey God, you want to be with God, and you don't want anything to happen that you don't think is right for God or with God or about God or related to God. That's good. Alhamdulillah. But it's that that perspective is limited. So let's move on and detail that a little bit more here. So we ended last session using this quote, and we're just going to begin, and I'm just going to just quickly summarize it. The Imam essentially is saying that when someone wants to bring us Islam as the religion, but they bring it to us in a way that doesn't have any respect for the after effects of slavery, said that's not really going to have much to offer to quote unquote African American or Black people. It has to have something that addresses that. If it doesn't address that, that's it. And he says, if there's a religion that will offer something to address that, then that religion brings something special. He says, for us, it just happens to be Islam. And that is the case. So there are those, and we're about to speak a little more to that after we get beyond the Islamic ethics, is the idea that all we gotta do is be Muslim. You have this idea. You have those we just be Muslim. Just say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. Salah, zakat, saum, hajj. Just be that. Just be a good person. And you'll be fine. No, no, that should be evident to us as well. Without going into rant, detail, editorial, it's like just look around, look at quote unquote Blacks, African Americans who identify themselves as Muslims, and look around and see how much of a genuine impact on the life of those people that they identify with is Islam al-Islam really actually. You find phenomenal outliers and examples, those phenomenal outlier and examples of quote unquote Muslims who are from the descendants of the ex-chattel slaves. There are some outstanding examples, but they are not the average. They are the outlier. When you point to the great ones, whoever they might be, whatever you say, and who have all the boxes checked that correct the damage that was done in the experimental clinic of chattel slavery. If you find them, then they got all those boxes checked. Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. You can rest assured it is only so because the way that they have embraced al-Islam and understood al-Islam, they embraced and understood al-Islam in the way and from the perspective of how it addressed that monstrous history. Otherwise, they can potentially be just I don't know what you might call it, facsimiles. Excuse me, facsimiles of what we hope to accomplish. What needs to be solved. Okay, so let's move on. So Farad, he brought something that was not a replay or even a purification of a pure administration of al-Islam. He didn't bring that. That was not what he brought. The label on it was Islam, but the content was not Islam. It was a particular prescription to address particular problems born and embedded in those generations of people by, again, just have to repeat it, by experimental clinic designed to cause us to dysfunction in the vital areas of our lives. And so where I said, okay, we got to fix this. So he came with that prescription, but that prescription was not pure al-Islam. So Imam Muhammad speaks about the motivation and intentions that Farad had in that choice and that decision and what he gave us, quote unquote, in the name of religion, but knowing that it wasn't religion. The Imam speaks to this in the Florida Prison Chaplain's Address, 1997. He said, but I do believe, and I'm saying all this because this is very important, what I'm getting ready to say. I do believe that that man, speaking of Farad, that man was believing that he was serving God. This foreigner, he was believing that he was doing a great service for God. But he didn't want my father, that is the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, or us to take that as the last thing. He's saying, I'm doing this, but I do want you to get beyond this. So I got to do something else along with this thing that I'm doing as well. So he says he didn't want my father or us to take that as the last thing. He said later, someone will come later, but we thought it would be hundreds of years later. And he would give you religion. Give you religion, Imam said. Well, what was he giving? If he said someone would come and give us religion, then that tells me that he didn't think he was giving us religion, that is Islam. He didn't. He knew he was not giving us Islam. And his hope was, and he said, I could spend a lot of time supporting this, it would take hours. So I'm just going to tell you these things that I'm convinced of. For us, his hope was that as circumstances got better for Blacks in America, that his followers would begin to change and a more educated, a more literate following would come as things got better for the poor Blacks. And then they would be able to see the glaring contradictions. Okay, let me reinforce the noble lie, the noble lie. The children were tricked out of the burning house, according to the Lotus Sutra, I believe it's called. And so many other things. You know, I told you the lie so you can get out. We played the V for Vendetta segment last week. So yes, I told you a lie, but the lie was for the purpose of saving your life. The lie was for the purpose of guiding you, getting you to the truth, etc. So these contradictions, the Imam speaks of, he said that would be able to, with this change in circumstance, they would be able to see the glaring contradictions. And that's what happened. And another thing my father said, son, my savior, he called his teacher his savior. He said, my savior told me not to worry myself about learning the Quran. He said, leave that for my children. And at that time, I was a baby, the Imam speaking of himself. I was a baby of 11 months old when this man told my father that. But thank God, circumstances changed to favor us having hope in America. And I began to see those glaring contradictions long before I identified with Sunni Islam, right? So again, you're talking about what was actually done. This, I have to use this word concoction. This concoction, but this concoction speaks to a very kind of randomness, but there's nothing random about what Professor Farad put together. But in any case, he quote unquote concocted it, and he passed it on as a responsibility to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who executed that concoction, if you will, executed with faith for 40 years, right? And in that same period of time, which served as the womb for W.D. Muhammad. And I'm reminded of the girl's name in the V for Vendetta, her Evie. And that's a play. Listen, Imam Muhammad tells us just that. He says, listen to the sound of words. Because when you hear the sound of words, it's suggesting something to you. Then think about what it's suggesting, right? It's very clear to me that V for Vendetta was particularly aware the Nation of Islam, of Farad Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, is in the Quran, etc. Because in both instances, the beginning of her journey, the Quran is at work, in that literally the word is up, because the guy that got taken and whatever executed, he was being executed for him having a Quran, right? That was the thing. He was gay, right? That wasn't what got him killed. What got him killed was having a Quran, right? And then Evie, her name is Evie Hammond. What is Evie? Evie is a little Eve. Evie, this is little Eve, right? So Eve, what is a woman? Eve is a womb. And the Farad statement is that we were a baby nation. We were a baby nation. So we were a little womb. We were a little ummah, you know. And this was Evie. And so Evie was the one that had to go through the transformation in order to come to that kind of freedom. And that was the case with the Nation of Islam of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad prior to Imam W. Muhammad. Imam W. Muhammad was the birth from the Evie womb, staying with what I'm saying right now. That was it. Okay, it's very, very important, right? To stay with anything after that is to stay with the afterbirth. And that's the only thing that I'm going to go ahead and say about that. The product, the hoped for product from that work was and is Imam W. Muhammad, and the thinking that is in those who transitioned with him, let's just put it like that, and transitioned through him. This thinking that you're hearing without detailing it, it's no boast. It's like, who thinks like this? There are people who they can't even think like this. You understand? And don't want to. Let's go ahead and grant that too. I don't want to think like that. Mashallah, alhamdulillah. Allah guides whom he wills, right? And Allah knows who's best guided along the way. But the point is, there was a product out of that hope and out of that concoction and out of that experiment. And it was and is the way of thinking, thought style, mindset, sensitivity, perception that comes from realizing the benefit of that transformation. You just can't think that way until you embrace that. And I know that somewhere I'm going to look that up, find something because most times you find movies, fairy tales, because there's a saying that says whatever is new is not true, whatever is true is not new. So we're saying things, but they're illustrations. They're whatever. It could be poem, story, myth, fable, movie, novel, whatever. That say, yeah, that's the case. Like you just cannot get that until you have a particular transformation, and then once that, the matrix. Once you have that transformation, you can see what others can't see. There's no boast. This is no other kind of. It's just a fact. Some of y'all laughing because you already know. As soon as I turn around looking for it, I won't be able to find it. I'll tell you about a book. I've told others about it before. Nope. Can't find it. But you look for it. You look for it. No, I'm not gonna find it. But it's called The Magic Eye Book. The Magic Eye Book. And it's a book. The book is full of 3D images embedded in what looks like it looks like just what a plain pattern. Just imagine like a wallpaper pattern type. Just doesn't matter. It just whatever. Look it up. The Magic Eye book, and you can look at it, and when you look at it, you look at it in the right way. Literally, you look at it in the right way, you will see the embedded 3D image in those every page that when you first look at it just looks like a fractal, just a repeating pattern, just covering the whole page. But embedded inside of that is a 3D image. Okay? It could be seahorses, it could be starfish, it could be whatever. Just you look at it, when you look at it first, without knowing how to adjust your vision, you just don't get it. But then once you see it, and when you see it, it's like, oh wow, it's really there. But you have to look at it in the proper way. It's an experience. It's a wonderful experience to have if you get it and find and go through it and tell you really do it. But that's what illustrates what I'm talking about. It's like right now, what I'm talking about right now, it's like, and I'm gonna keep going, but it's like it's hard to see the end of what I'm saying. But mashallah, I'm praying Allah, bless me with the life and the continuity and continuation and the clarity and the cohesion, etc., to get to the end of this. Because there's so much powerful points to be made that just okay. So I guess I gotta just got sorry, I'm getting a little something in my eye right now. Sorry. So it's so much so. Okay. So the idea is that the womb that Farad Muhammad actually created a womb in the Nation of Islam that would be the locus of germinating a completely new individual. And butterflies come to mind, but I'm going to resist talking about that right now. So our human perception of events is always limited. Whatever it is that we see, it's limited. It's like right now, as much as you can see. You can see as much as you can see that's right in front of you or in your peripheral view. You can't see what's behind you. You have to turn around. And when you turn around, you can't see what is now behind you that used to be in front of you. So that's how it is with life on all levels with us. Our perception of events is always limited, but the wisdom of Allah encompasses greater knowledge and understanding. Right? Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, 216. It says, fighting has been enjoined upon you while it is hateful to you, but perhaps you hate a thing that is good for you, and perhaps you love a thing that is bad for you, and Allah knows while you know not. So it's like we pass a judgment on something, but sometimes we hate what we should love, and sometimes we love what we should hate because of our human limitations. And Surah Nisa, 4th chapter, 19th verse, it says, "O you who believe, it is not lawful for you to inherit women by compulsion, and do not make difficulties for them in order to take back part of what you gave them unless you commit a clear immorality. And live with them in kindness, for if you dislike them, perhaps you dislike a thing, and Allah makes therein much good," right? I usually express it as it may be that you dislike a thing through which Allah brings about a great deal of good. So that's just translations. So the idea is that you love something, there's a case there, a condition where you could be loving something that you should hate, hating something that you should love. It could be that you're disliking something that's good for you, that you're disliking something, and out of that thing that you're disliking, It brings about a great deal of good. That's the nature of our life. And this is God telling us, look, everything is not black and white. Everything is not cut and dry. Everything is not just right and wrong. There's more than one way to look at matters that you're faced with. And that's why the invitation, fastabiqul khairat, strive after what's best under the circumstance. You must be a thinking person. You can't be a reactive person and have a good life and have a progressive life. You can't just give knee-jerk reactions to this or that. It has to be thought out. All right. You have to think about it. Back to the chessboard. You have to think about it. You're about to make this move as it relates to your wife. You're about to make this move as it relates to your husband. You're about to make this move as it relates to your business. You're about to make this move as it relates to whatever. It's like, are you moving in thought or are you just moving on feeling? Right. So something that may feel right may not be the right thing to do. And something that feels wrong may be the right thing to do. That's why we ask, Ihdina siratal mustaqim. We ask God to guide us on the straight path, as we say. So these verses emphasize the importance of trust in divine wisdom and the understanding that human judgment is limited, encouraging believers to have faith in the greater good that may come from situations they initially perceive as unfavorable, right? One of the matters in the history of al-Islam that comes to mind is the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. And the Treaty of Hudaybiyah was the first treaty between the Meccans and the Muslims. And the Prophet ﷺ, he saw it as a great victory, as a great success, a great achievement. But almost 100% of the Muslims didn't see it as a victory initially, as a triumph of some sorts. And without getting into it, I advise you to go study the Treaty of Hudaybiyah in the background for it. I said almost 100%. His wife, Sophia, was with him at the time. So the Prophet had told the people to sacrifice their animals, and nobody, because they were making Hajj, intended to make Hajj. But they were halted, and that's probably the rest of the history is said. So they stopped there so they wouldn't make Hajj that year, and there were those who were disappointed. And so the Prophet was so undone, basically, by their failure to respond even to his orders of sacrificing the animal, that he was despondent in the tent, etc. His wife told him, said, you go do what you're supposed to do. It's like, you do it. And the Prophet went out and did it, and then everybody followed suit. And of course, the rest is history. But the point is that the Prophet could see the good in it, and obviously Allah had it in his plan as a good, but the common believer didn't see the good in it. And so I just want us to understand that is a part of the human condition, that sometimes we think we're seeing things the way that they are, and we think that we have the answer, and it's not necessarily the case, right? And so this is what we have to bring to mind in matters such as, well, what about the Nation of Islam? What about Farad? What about Elijah Muhammad, etc.? The fact is, at times, actions that may seem morally wrong, when judged by conventional standards, can be seen as appropriate and essential when viewed from a higher spiritual and ethical perspective. This is not chicanery. This is not manipulation. This is not whatever. Let's call it self-justification. Well, I mean, it is an explanation, and it can be read and will be read by some as self-justification, but it doesn't. Excuse me. That being the case, that it is the reality of life that this is the case. The reality of life, some of the verses and the other verses coming, But the two sections that we just read before this is they speak to the fact that at times actions that may seem morally wrong, when judged by conventional standards, can be seen as appropriate and essential when viewed from a higher spiritual ethical perspective. That's what has to be understood. I'm saying fair judgment and important context to put around Farad Muhammad, Elijah Muhammad, Imam W. Muhammad, and the quote unquote the whole legacy of the Nation of Islam is this very fact that there are some people who look at what was done in and as the Nation of Islam. They see it as morally wrong, but they're judging by the conventional standards, as limited even as they are, of quote unquote Islam at the level that they understand it. They said, no, that's wrong. But when you have the fuller context and when you incorporate the reality of the circumstances being addressed, you may come to the same conclusion that we are on, that it is not only appropriate, but it was essential from a higher spiritual ethical perspective, given the nature of the circumstances. Fastabiqul khairat. Go back, encapsulate in your mind very quickly this 400-year history that we're talking about and everything that's incorporated. And it's like, I'm talking that the book Cast, just take that, just that one book, Cast, the Isabel Wilkerson book. It's like, read that book. Just read that book. I'm not talking about the library of all the many other books that are talking about 100 years of lynching and whatever else. It's like, no, just that book. And you see, it's like, man, I mean, you can deal with the 20th century and what, quote unquote, Black people experienced in the 20th century. It's like, man. So this is a situation like no other. So you cannot use conventional standards to judge responses to that, right? When you talk about John Brown and Nat Turner and Denmark Vesey and all the others who did what they did under the circumstances that they were operating under, it's like, how are you going to bring standard judgment to that? But let's move on. But that's what Muslims is, and particularly, mashallah, particularly those who are not of the background of the sleeping mentally dead so-called American Negro ex-slaves, descendants of ex-slaves. I mean, it's like, you don't understand. You really don't understand. It's like, it's not your fault. It makes me think about that Samuel Jackson deal, A Time to Kill. He's got a real heavy monologue with Matthew McConaughey on there. I haven't memorized it. I haven't tried to. But yeah, I think if you've seen the movie, you saw when he was in jail. He said, you know why I hired you? Because you one of them. So it's like, man, look, homie. You just don't understand. Right? There's a time to do this and there's a time to do that. Right? And that's that life, man. That's that life. It's sort of like, if you don't get it, then you just don't get it. Let me hit you one more thing here. In this connection, right? Because I'm seeing examples that there's this piece that I saved that really points out the difference between the cultural mindset. Some of you may have seen Denzel's piece. He's doing an interview and talking about the first movie role that he was offered. It was all, and literally the movie was The Nigga That Couldn't Be Killed or something like that. And you can look that up, just, whatever, Google it and just Denzel Washington talking about the nigga that couldn't be killed. It's a real short. one of those YouTube shorts type of thing. And and so he talked about, the people thinking it comical when it came to the scene situation, trying to get him to buy into the laugh. He said, "Oh yeah, yeah." So Denzel said, "Oh yeah, yeah, it's like this." Okay, so what if we took some people, and we had them all lined up, and we had them come into a place, and they think they're about to take a shower, but when they get into the shower, they are sprayed with acid. It's not funny now, right? Because it's like from that perspective that you were looking at, oh, that's funny, right? The nigga that couldn't be killed. Okay, well, how come when the shoe's on the other foot, it's not funny? Because you come from a different set of sensitivities, a different set of values, a different perception thereby, and that's the case. And so there's another joke done by this. I can't think of the guy. It's Jerry Seinfeld. Yeah, Seinfeld. So Seinfeld and somebody else. This is on like a talk show kind of situation. And so the point that was being made about the difference in culture, And so a joke was told, and this was the joke. The joke was uh, two men meet at a bar. Then at a bar, they meet someone. One's a Jewish businessman, and one is a non-Jewish businessman. And so so they asked the question. So the businessman is asked that says, how's business? So the non-Jewish businessman said, oh, everything's fine, everything's great. And then the two Jews, they laughed, right? They laughed. That this is in the interview situation, the two Jews, when they heard the response of the non-Jewish guy answering the question, how's business, and saying, oh, business is fine, the two Jews laughed. They laughed because they understood the joke. So it's like, if you're not inside of that culture, you didn't get the joke. Why was that a joke when someone asked the non-Jewish businessman and they respond and said, oh, business is fine. And then the Jews laughed, right? So what was the joke? Let me take you off the hook right there. It could be done better. You can look that one up too. The reason they laughed is because the Jewish businessman would not ever actually answer how's business with business is great. No, he would have some kind of complaint. If something would be wrong, somebody's losing his shirt on this, and blah, blah, blah. That's just the way you do it when you are a Jewish businessman, by the culture, right? So the point is that if you are not in touch, and mashallah, it is what it is. If you're not in touch by the legacy, I'm talking about, yes, DNA, historical, if you're not connected with that situation, your judgment of what's done by those who are a part of that, basically, it very often is just not going to be correct. It's just not going to be correct, because it's like the Magic Eye book. It's like you just can't see it. You just can't see it. And you can be convinced that there's nothing there. And you can tell others, look at it, there's nothing there. But those who see by virtue of the experience and the eyes that have come through that experience, and no, I see it very, very clearly, right? So much to be said. So the point is, let me see concretely. The point is, those who judge Farad Muhammad, Elijah Muhammad, W.D. Muhammad as being off base, wrong, incorrect, bid'ah, whatever you put on it, whatever you want to put on it. Either you have taken on the eyes of those who didn't have eyes. So you're not looking through your eyes. You're looking through the eyes that somebody gave you to look through. And so therefore you see it the way they see it. But if you have been freed from both sets of eyes, the set of eyes that are still being governed by their experience that blinded them, and so you don't see because you still have the Negro eyes, right? Or you have taken on the eyes of someone who never had your eyes, and they've convinced you and you've converted to their perceptions of it. And so therefore, everything that you see is filtered through the standards that they have, that you've adapted from them. So from both perspectives, man, they're all wrong. So that's one of the critical big differences is that, and this is what those identify with Imam Muhammad rahimahullah. This is one of the conditions that we frankly simply have to accept. Yeah. But when I say simply have to accept, from the perspective of don't spend a whole lot of time, don't lose a whole lot of energy trying to convince somebody that they're not serious. We're doing this to just lay it out concretely, but I don't have a vested interest in making sure that thousands and thousands of people right now get a better understanding and embrace this. No, I'm doing this for the record. I'm doing this for the here. I'm doing this for those who often are confronted by those perceptions, but sometimes you don't have the rationale to, quote unquote, comfort yourself on one level, but then also to reply to that position. And when I say comfort you, I say, oh, okay, well, there's one. They don't have their own eyes on. They're using conventional standards. They don't understand the full context. And I ain't got time to tell them. If you have time to tell them, then tell them. If there's an opening for you to share, share. But otherwise, move on. I mean, that's the nature of it. That's just how it is. There's going to be people who die without understanding this, and they're going to die being against it and live their life against, mashallah. That's it. Don't worry about it. So let's move on to the next thing. So transition more formally. At times, actions that may seem morally wrong when judged by conventional standards can be seen as appropriate and essential when viewed from higher spiritual and ethical perspectives. And here's an example. There's a very big, clear example of this from the life of Musa, alayhi salatu wasalam. And based on the time, we go very quickly through this. So this is Surah Al-Kahf, right? A chapter that we're encouraged to read by the Sunnah of the Prophet every week. One of the stories is the story of Musa, alayhi salatu wasalam, following Al-Khizr, as tradition tells us, or the wise man. And so the story goes that Prophet Musa was looking for a man that had been guided and taught by Allah. And so he found the man and he told the man, I wanted to follow you so I can learn what God has taught you. And he said, you can't be patient with me. And Moses, yes, I can be patient. He said, how can you be patient with that about which your understanding is not complete? So Musa was accepted to go on the journey, but the man said, look, just don't ask me no questions. Don't question anything I do while we're going. And I think most of you are familiar enough with the story. So the man, he scuttled the boat, he killed the boy, he fixed the wall, right? And these stories, and this is essentially the summation of this. And so let me just read this quickly. It said, So they set out until they came to the point to people of a town. They asked his people for food, but they refused to offer them hospitality. This is at the very end. And they found therein a wall about to collapse, so he restored it. Moses said, if you wish, you could have taken a payment for it, because here's another case where the wise man had done the opposite of what Moses thought he should do, right? And then the wise man said, all right, this is the party between you and me. I'm going to tell you the interpretation of what you didn't understand and you couldn't be patient with. He said, as for the ship, that is a boat that he scuttled, it belonged to poor people who worked the sea. So I intended to cause a defect in it. Because there was a king that was coming and who would seize every good ship by force. So if he scuttled the boat, then that means that the king would leave it alone and people still have their means of livelihood. The boy that he killed, he said, and as for the boy, his parents were believers and were feared, and we feared that he would overburden them by transgression and disbelief. So the child was taken out, and is Allah's intention to protect the parents from the harm that the boy would bring in their life. Yes, Allah will do that. And then, so we intended that their Lord should substitute for them a better than him in purity and nearer to mercy. And then the last one was, and as for the wall, it belonged to two orphan boys in the city, and there was beneath it a treasure for them, and their father had been righteous. So your Lord intended that they reach the maturity and extract their treasure as a mercy from your Lord. And I did it not of my own accord. That is the interpretation about which you could not have patience. All right. So here's a case where Musa alayhi salatu wasalam had this conventional standard, this conventional perception of what was moral, conventional perception of what's right, what's wrong, what is according to the rules, and what breaks the rules. He came to the wise man with that, and the wise man broke all those rules that he had in mind under the circumstances. And it's an education for Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, is that everything is not black and white. Everything is not just right and wrong. Everything is not, quote, moral and or immoral, right? One of the signs in the story also is which speaks to what Moses' issue was, and Allah knows best, is that they lost the fish, and then he went and he sought rest on a rock. He sought rest on a rock. And then he told the boy, he said, bring me our lunch. And that's when he found out that the fish had gotten away, right? Critical thing, again, W.D. Muhammad, language of W.D. Muhammad, the methodology for reading, tafsir, etc., of the Imam. He sought rest on a rock. He thought his destiny, rest his destiny. He thought his destiny was in logic, the rock, right? And so he was trying to eat. He was trying to eat based on his logic. He said, no, logic is not going to feed you in the way that you're talking about being fed. What you're looking for is that you'll find this one where the two rivers meet. You can get across out of that, but the point is where you got two rivers, right? So you have the spiritual and the logical. It said, and the fish took off in the channel, straight in the channel. So you have spiritual logic in that. There's something going straight, that's logic. In the water, that's spiritual. So the spiritual logic, that's what Moses didn't have. He had the logic, but he didn't have the spiritual logic. He didn't have the life of the water, which is the fish. All right, so that's all, mashallah, just a brief snippet of the way Imam Muhammad taught his students to read it. Okay, but the message for where we are right now is the idea that if you have this rule-based conventional standards, this moral, immoral, right, wrong, black, white, perception of and standard for your judgment, you're going to misjudge many things, one of which is the Nation of Islam and the work of Farad Muhammad. Another example from the Quran that speaks about this perception, how things can't be just judged on simple morality. In the story of Yusuf, alayhi salatu wasalam, 1276, says, so he began to search, meaning the guard was searching their bag, the bags of his brothers, that is Yusuf's brothers, who didn't know that that Yusuf was the brother that they quote unquote threw into the well. So he began to search with their baggage before he came to the baggage of his brother. At length he brought it out of his brother's baggage. Thus did we plan for Joseph. He could not take his brother by the law of the king, except that Allah willed it so. We raise to degrees of wisdom whom we please, but over all endued with knowledge is one, the all-knowing. So here Allah is saying, just basically, just the spirit of what Allah is saying is, look, I know how y'all look at it. This is anybody at any time reading the story. I know how you all look at it, right? It's, but he couldn't have done what he did if he stayed within the law of the king. All right. So yes, what he's doing is breaking the law. It's still what he did is still against the law. It's called entrapment. It's called entrapment, or it's called whatever it's called when the police plant the dope or plant the gun, in the car, and the person that ain't mine. I didn't put that. I don't know how that got there, right? Okay, well that's what they did to Joseph, in the story of Joseph, to his brother Benjamin, if you will. And so that was entrapment. That was planting evidence, right? And God said, I know. But God is saying he couldn't have done this, that he couldn't have, the strategy was, or the plan was, to get his brother to stay. He didn't want his brother to go back with the other brothers. But he couldn't just hold him hostage, if you will, or what have you, straight out. He said he had to create a criminalization situation so that he could hold the brother. So he could not take his brother by the law of the king, except that Allah willed it so. So Allah has set up a situation where, okay, do this, and then you can do that. And then God is saying, for some of you, you're not going to get it. He said, but we raise to degrees of wisdom whom we please. But over all endued with knowledge is one all-knowing. So even with these grades and layers and levels of whatever, ethics, insight, etc., it's like Allah is the one who's over all of that. And there are there are levels that are transcended. At this level, yes, that is right, that is wrong, that is proper, that is improper, etc. But at this level right here, all that is nullified. All that is negated. But it's negated and nullified according to my will. It's just like with the Moses and the wise man. It's negated and nullified according to my will. No, that's not murder. No, that's not destruction of private property. No, that's not, I would say, failing to be conciliatory or tit for tat, or whatever you describe that last one as. The idea is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in his plan and his way, allows for rules, principles, laws that are standard and useful and that are civilizationally helpful. Allah will keep those in place, but then Allah will also allow, in accordance with his will, the transcendence of those civilizational rules and readings and understandings in order to fulfill his plan, right? That happens. And I'm saying, yes, that's what happened in the Nation of Islam, and Allah knows best, of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Farad Muhammad. Here's another, this is the story of Ibrahim, alayhi salam, a part of the story of Ibrahim. And so So Abraham, he had told him, I have a plan for your gods, whatever. And so when they went away for their celebration or what have you, Abraham broke up all the idols. And they said, have you done this to our gods, Abraham? And he said, rather this, he said, the biggest one did it. The biggest one did it. So ask them if they can speak, right? So literally, when you read the Arabic, قالوا, they said, أأنت فعلت هذا أهلاتنا. This is, I know it's ilaha. بآلهاتنا, to our gods, Ya Ibrahim, O Abraham. Qala, Abraham said, or he said, Qala bal. He said, basically, when you say no, it's going against it. It's saying no. So, or rather, that's a translation of it. It says, on the contrary, basically, that's what it's saying. فَأَلَّهُ, he did it. فَأَلَّهُ, so Abraham's saying, the big one did it. That's not true. That's not true. فَعَلَهُ كَبِيرُهُم, the biggest one of them, هذا, he's the one, هذا فَسَأَلُهُم, so ask him, إِن كَانُوا يَنْتِقُونَ, if they can speak. So Abraham had a strategy to break up, again, destruction of private property, right? To break it up, knowing that they're going to ask him, knowing that they were going to cry, and according to the story, he put the axe on the big one. He said, he did it, right? But is that true? No, it's not true. But what was the objective? The objective was to reveal a truth, to teach a truth, to change minds, hearts, spirits, attitudes on the thing that needed to be changed. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has shown us a model of, yes, there are strategies that you can take that breaks the rules of the conventional perceptions of those that you are trying to change and affect. God has, by these examples, shown us that there is approval for it if they meet the standards. But we can't, it's Allah is the one who's the final judge in those matters. The judge of the wise man, the judge of Yusuf, the judge of Abraham, alayhi salatu wasalam. That's Allah's judgment. So that's why we don't say, Rahimallahu alayhi or radiyallahu anhu when we say Farad's name. But the reality of what was impacted and what was done, there's a benefit here. So if Allah wills, then Allah is going to give him the best, give him the benefit, give him the grace, give him the forgiveness, inshallah. But that would be Allah's decision. But that's not our call to ask for, because he, quote unquote, knew Islam. And he brought something to the people who didn't know Islam, something that wasn't Islam. But he also knew that it wasn't Islam. He was working on a project peculiar to a particular people. And that's why, again, that message, a part of keeping people out of the temple, as it were, at that time, it's like there's also, no, y'all don't need this. All y'all, in fact, we were told to go after the dissatisfied. As we told, dissatisfaction bring about a change. And we were told, watch out for the 10%ers, and the rest of the folks were the 85%ers, and the civilized man was the 5%. And we know that some of the history of that, or what that came to be. So why? Because it was designed like a prison, just like the Evie Hammond thing in V for Vendetta. It's like, okay, it's a prison. It's like everybody don't need to be in the prison, and everybody's not going to get the benefit out of the prison, etc. So we're going to keep those people out. We're going to keep those people out. The ones we're going after is the dead, the dissatisfied, etc. And so it was a particular response to a peculiar problem, which we've, already talked about it in detail. So we're gonna wind up here. Let's see what comes up now. Okay, well maybe this is yeah. Okay, yeah. We'll make this part the end of this, and we'll pick up from here next week. Because there were a particular thing was done because of a particular set of circumstances, and it was an ethical choice, a choice that is not without support in the life model of Prophet Muhammad, in the scriptures of the Quran, etc., to do something that doesn't fit the conventional standards of, quote, morality, unquote, that most people would have, even in al-Islam. And I've tried to give those examples for that. So statement here is, the ex-chattel slave and victim of the experimental clinic needed to be immunized and inoculated from its effect. We needed something and need something like nobody else needs and needed. That is the case. That's the reality. No, I think that's just so very important. When we talk about diagnosis, prognosis, and prescription, the prescription that was the Nation of Islam, as it were, at that time in the founding of Farad Muhammad, it's like it was a very particular prescription for people that had a very specific condition. It wasn't for everybody. It isn't for everybody, but it was a definite. So it's like for somebody else to take somebody else's prescription, it will probably kill you. So the idea is to know this prescription is for a very particular group of people that suffer a very particular condition, and these were the ex-chattel slaves and victims of the experimental clinic needed. They needed to be immunized and inoculated from its effects. We'll go into it more, inshallah, next week. So the general paradigm for immunization through inoculation involves introducing a controlled amount of an antigen into the body to stimulate the immune system to develop immunity against the specific pathogen without causing the disease itself. So let's take a minute, reflect on that, think about that. We're gonna open it up, inshallah, perhaps more next week. Because the point is that, okay, you say, well, that was wrong and that was inappropriate and that was, bid'ah, and that was, shirk and all of this, right? Yeah. Because everything that had been done to us diseased us in a very particular way. And in order to reverse the effects through the awakening of our natural immune system, that original immune system that was suppressed in the dehumanization process, it had to be woke up again. In order for it to be woke up again, it had to be inoculated with a little bit of what made it sick. Not too much, but just enough to get that immune system, that original humane immune system, immunity to the falsehood, immunity to the corruption, immunity to the way of life that we had been encouraged into. Do that, and you will start seeing the reversal of the condition, inshallah. So, alhamdulillah, that's going to be it for today. And we close out here formally, because if we make it too big, then it's harder to edit and get there. Imam Joel, real quick.
Assalamu alaikum. You answered my first question, because I was going to say they give you a little bit of the poison to make you immune, and I thought the NOI was really a play on Christianity for us. With
Oh yeah.
So you answered that one. So
yeah.
But the second one, when you talked about the junction of the two C's,
yeah,
and Imam Muhammad quoted the cross as static life that cannot move, and
Yeah.
and you showed that Moses was stuck in his thinking.
Yes.
And anytime that we're really stuck in our thinking, we are on a cross. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So I wanted to throw that out there for you. I know time is wise. I know you don't want. I don't want to open that door for you, but I.
Yeah. No. 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 It is. When people talk about the crux of the matter, right? We say, well, what's the crux of the matter? You talking about a cross there too, right? And so that's what the dilemma is. The ethical dilemma is, and even when we say ihdina sirat al mustaqim, that you have the sirat and you have the sirat and the mustaqim. One is vertical and one is horizontal, right? And when you have the vertical and the horizontal, then what you wind up with in a cross, you have 490-degree angles, right? And when you're at a crossroads, the idea is, ihdina sirat al mustaqim. Show me, you can say, show me the straight way, but also it could mean show me the right angle, because that's what a 90-degree angle is, the right angle. But you always need to know, well, what's the right angle to approach this with, right? Going back to the fastabiqul khairat. So and then the answer is where the two rivers meet, right? The answer is, right, you have to find the place where you have both of those things, both matters addressed, the spiritual and the logical. When you're able to see the physical and the metaphysical, the concrete and the abstract of the situation, and make a decision on that, then that, inshallah, if Allah has guided you to it, then it's the best. That's the best answer.
Put a picture of that book that you were looking for. I'll put that in the chat so they can see the cover of the book
Oh,
on
which
the magic of the magic eye.
Oh, Magic Eye
It's the
book.
cover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, if you had that experience, it's like no other. All right. All right. All right, brother and sister, thank you so much. Everybody have a wonderful day. Allah's peace be on you. Those of you who are part of the ACU, inshallah, we have a session tomorrow, 10:30. All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.